Welcome to NeuroNoodle's Neurofeedback and Neuropsychology podcast featuring tech legend Jay Gunkelman. He's the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans, and Dr. Marie Swingle, author of iMinds. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The NeuroNoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.
So, with the more traditional brain implant, where you put a network of kind of a fabric laid on top of the brain, they've added in a chip, an AI chip, a neural network chip to that. And they put it over the speech area. And
is that the Wernicke?
Wernicke and a bit further forward as well, which is more expressive, not just receptive, but some expressive. So the fellow grew up early in his life speaking Spanish, but his dominant language is now English. But he had a stroke and he could not speak. So they put this experimental BCI implant in, and it learned his speech patterns so well that he can switch between Spanish and English and speak.
What?
Okay, and this isn't something where it was some radical threads being implanted with. I mean, they took a piece out, skull out, laid this on nicely, and put the piece of skull back like they do, and stitch everything up, and the bones heal back up. Anyway, Elon Musk's first implant patient is a fail, and right now he has control of a mouse, which you can do with Surface. You don't need implanted to control a mouse. So
the chemical energy coming off of the scalp without doing anything invasive is the same thing that is going
the
on with
EEG,
number one.
The classic EEG brain-computer interface that Burbaumer did from the Surface could control a mouse. So that it's not that his succeeded. 75% of the threads that were implanted surgically, like stuck into the cortex, which is invasive and can cause bleeding and problems, but 75% of those threads retracted. They pulled back out. And that's because the brain moves. And if you have a fixed spot and you don't have strain relief of some sort, they assumed it could move 1 centimeter, and it moved 3. So
for laymen like me, you need a longer extension cord.
You need a strain relief at the beginning, like a loop that would allow the thread to go in and out without pulling out. Anyway, but that's his method. You build them fast, blow them up, and then figure out what the hell happened and fix that and build another one. So the patient, on the other hand, is ecstatic because, he went from being a quad with nobody paying attention to him to now being interviewed, et cetera, and but he's not part of any medical study. There's no supervision, the IRB-ish stuff. The FDA approved it for experimental implant, and but again, it's anything they learn is basically for their use, and again, it's probably going to be some loopy strain relief added into the implant, but without that invasive an implant, just with this AI chip on regular implant electrodes. Now, that was predicted probably maybe 3 years ago now by Dirk De Ridder. There's a a talk online by Dirk about brain-computer interface stuff and chips with AI on them and uh, all of that kind of stuff. So he did a real nice online video, talk about it.
So,
And
so who has the look? Elon Musk, he does a lot of stuff. He makes mistakes quickly and he fixes them quickly. And unfortunately, there's human beings in between. I get it. And I post the news just because it's news,
yeah,
and
yeah.
if it can give awareness on the stuff that things like Dirk.
And it's not all bad news,
Yeah,
I mean, the guy didn't get killed by the machine, So,
he's not
uh,
suing.
and they will learn, you know.
Yeah,
The existent methods of putting in stentrodes inside the vasculature that can be implanted. They thread up through and like a stent to open up a vessel. That's their electrode now. It's got a little amp in it. A little ultrasound fires it up. Kind of like an RFID sort of a thing,
right.
only it's ultrasound, not a field. Anyway, the um, uh, the methods of putting in electrodes that are existent are doing really well without that kind of an invasive surgical, simply putting one on. And then there are implanted deep electrodes that are put in routinely for Parkinsonism.
Yeah,
And at this point, they're going to be putting in AI chips on that. They've got them recorded, not just stimulating to stop the tremor, but they've got those now recording EEG as well.
Dr.
So,
Marie,
Good morning.
hello, hello.
Hello.
you just walked into Elon Musk and brain implants.
Oh,
Uh, we
good
were
God.
we were just chatting a little ahead of time. So,
Yeah,
no,
no,
I
no.
I I
Okay.
mentioned the new finding where the fellow had a stroke and lost the ability to speak,
Uh-huh.
and they put in a standard grid, the 10 centimeter grid of electrodes, but it had an AI neural network chip on it,
Okay.
and it learned his speech, and he can think to speak now, and it learned the difference between Spanish and English.
Okay.
So he was bilingual, and the chip identified whether he was speaking Spanish or English. So
Okay. Are
um,
there videos that go with this that this is or
this
like
is
I mean
this
it
is
sounds a little bit I'm
it,
gonna be if this is true, like whoa, wow.
this is true. It's UC San Francisco Med Center, and
Okay.
it's a it's a more traditional. I mean, it's a standard implant with an AI neural network on it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
again, we were saying Dirk De Ridder predicted that these would be the case about 3 years ago or so in a very nice talk that he provided.
Nice, nice. Okay. Well, then I'm going to completely do a positive flip, not a flip flop. Fantastic.
Brain computer interface is something that has a solid literature behind it.
Yeah.
And years ago, uh, we were um I was contacted by the military, and they had invited Dirk and Yuri to come over and provide advice
Yeah.
as to
Yeah.
what to spend money on for TBI and PTSD.
Yeah.
Now, they hadn't responded, so they contacted me and said, "We contacted them. Why didn't they respond?" And I said, "Well, they get contacted by everybody, unless
Yeah.
they kind of knew you or whatever. You just hit the circular file, and let me see if I can get them interested." And I said, "Come on over. We'll party together for a few days, and so we literally I got in because I was carrying the train of the two of them as they went in.
The
But
connector, no pun intended.
but the intention here was to get on the list of services and techniques that are accepted, and the accepted technology list, basically. Neurofeedback was not going to be accepted because the literature there was kind of iffy and thin. So we suggested that they look at the BCI literature. Oh, well, brain-computer interface. All right. Well, what's that? Is neurofeedback,
Yeah.
So we got neurofeedback in under the BCI label onto the approved technology list, and then QEG. Well, that's that controversial, very controversial topic, and for God's sakes, we can't get into a controversy. And I simply said, well, there's a standard billing code for digital analysis of the EEG. And in epilepsy, they use it for spike localization and dipole fitting, and that you can't disallow the digital analysis of the EEG. It's a standard billing code. There's the EEG and the interpretation. There's the digital processing and interpretation. 4 standard billing codes. Okay, fair standard billing codes. We got to accept those, So QEG got in as digital analysis of the EEG, and was then something that they could actually, do under the approved technology list. So we got in order to kind of influence some of the things to keep our field accessible for treating veterans with PTSD and brain trauma. So,
yeah.
What would it be worth it to do a invasive brain-computer interface? Like, what symptom would you want to alleviate? What would make it worth it to do it, you think, Jay? What would be the number one thing?
Everybody is talking about ALS, and that's kind of an end state. The person's totally freaking paralyzed. They can't even blink to say yes or no, and for them, it's their last hope. However, there's a lot more really common things that you can end up having it applied to.
Yeah.
A stroke where you lose speech. And again, recently, UC San Francisco put in an implant, a standard grid implant with a chip, an AI neural network chip, which actually has a neurons in it, and that learns the EEG patterns and the grid, and they're right on the cortex, so they're picking up high resolution inputs, and this chip learned the speech that the person who had lost speech was intending to say and would speak it, and it deciphered the difference between his Spanish and his English. He was bilingual.
Yeah.
So the level of possibilities are there, and that's obviously a new experimental chip that was put in. But it shows, I think, how many people get ALS? It's not nearly as common. How many people have a stroke and lose their speech? Well, for God's sakes, everybody knows somebody that did that, So that's a real common one. Paralysis, where you've got a quad, that's a perfectly good one. But you've got a quad who had Elon Musk's put in, and it basically failed. 75% of all the threads that were surgically stuck into his cortex retracted. And it's because the brain moves, and they didn't take that into account in their engineering. They were advised that the brain could move maybe a centimeter, as opposed to actually measuring it. I mean, you can measure these things. Ultrasound beams bounced off the midline can tell you how much it moves, and the actual distance was 3 centimeters. But the person's a quad. He's got a lot of cortical loss, and it's a little floppier than it might be for somebody else. So they didn't take that into account, and so their implant failed. Although he still has general control over a mouse. And he can speak, so if you can, search a mouse around and click and, get the microphone click, you can type and send messages and stuff. So his ability to do that still existed with the remnants of what was in there. But you can do that with surface EEG. So, that that's a fail,
Yeah.
but he'll learn, and like blowing up the rocket ship and learning what happened and building another one, he'll
Yeah,
come up.
this is where I want to jump in. Like I am 100% in agreement with Jay, and I think most of us are in terms of, yeah, loss of speech, certain types of, strokes, and paralysis. Yeah, these are people who are in need. There's a lot of them, and this is a real service to people, and dare I say humanity. But playing around, because things are cool, and money is a really, really interesting thing, in terms of the permissions that are taken. But again, if as Jay said, blowing up a rocket, we don't want people blowing up people's brains, right? And I think one of the key things is money sometimes is the wrong determinant of intelligence, or genius, is very, very different, sometimes when overfunded, because you can get into these really, really weird ethical conundrums, and I would say followings, and we lose the science, and we lose the ethics. But we need our mavericks as well. We just we need good mavericks, if that's not a
The
an
development,
oxymoron.
the very development of the technologies and chips and what they stimulate was developed based on solid science.
Yeah.
Dirk De Ridder, there was no pulsed stimulation. The frequencies went up to 600 hertz, and they say, well, why? Well, because spikes, the spikes in the EEG can be detected at a 600 hertz frequency. So, all of that ended up being his invention. Now, again, about 3 years ago, he said there's going to be AI chips that are in implants in order for the implant to learn to adapt to the actual content, as opposed to what you'd think might be there from the outside, which is we're not very good at predicting the detail of the cortex from the surface. We lose a lot of resolution on the EEG from the surface of the scalp to the surface of the brain, and so they want to get the electrodes down in there for a good purpose, because they get a lot more. They can get a lot more control surfaces, a lot of more little things that are under your control. So, and
How,
if you can do think to speech, and it can identify languages, the chip with the AI on it was a really good invention, and you couldn't have predicted that exact patterning from the outside.
Best
Uh,
brain band-aid ever.
but
yeah.
Jay, I'm still scratching my head here. I, my limited knowledge is making me think that he didn't have enough threads going, and he didn't have enough slack going on the threads that he did have because of the movement. What what is Dirk doing, or maybe we need to get him out of his busy schedule to come on here and explain this to us, maybe in
We'll,
2 years.
we'll,
But
we'll, we'll see what we can do to invite him on.
yeah, but
it,
like,
it
what are they attaching it to? That's my question. Neurofeedback is
uh,
like you're creating new pathways
yeah,
or shortening the pathways to get something from here to here to here. What they
yeah.
put the chip in, what are they how are they attaching it better than Elon?
You basically, in an experimental circumstance, may even still be tethered, but which Elon is to tethered to the device on the implanted on the top of the scalp, but they're implants to the brain that are implanted routinely and for permanent implant usually end up having a battery and on-off adjustable input kind of thing on that you can program some things, and they implant that in the chest wall, and you can charge it with a inductive coil like you charge a phone by setting it on top of a charger, and you basically end up having an implant that has a broadcast capability to the analytic computers, and you end up having a voice synthesizer in the computer, so you end up thinking and it speaks. So,
Is it possible to have a jar up on the shelf and just have a brain in there and have...
I don't know that we're ever going to do that, Although,
I don't know. I
I
don't
saw
know.
the craziest advertisement for an implanting a head onto a body, and I'm thinking, gee, in the 1970s, I remember in Berkeley, there was a van that would drive around, and on the back of the van it said, "Life extension through cryonic suspension." So I look up what these crazy people are, and if you really are rich, you can have your whole body frozen. And if they ever figure out how to fix what the hell was wrong with you, they can thaw you out, supposedly. I mean, how do you thaw out a frozen body without it going bad, I mean, anyway, there's all sorts of difficulties with it technically. Or if you didn't want to spend a whole fortune, you could have just the head saved. So I'm thinking, gee, there's a whole bunch of heads that are,
There are, and I'm
yeah.
really kind of wondering what happens. Going really sick here, but
Well,
an
you don't want to
electrical
have a
storm
power.
and the generator goes out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you want to have a bunch of heads that go bad.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but this is I think this is really good what we're talking about. We have the true blue, really amazing experimental science, and then we have kind of the wackos, and what happens when they converge. Also, because
yeah,
I'm going to piggyback Pete in terms of like how is the difference explained to the layperson? I mean, a lot of lay people have trouble understanding true neurotherapy from just this kind of woo-woo dynamic stuff. But yeah, what we do is we attach electrodes to the brain and we have our computer
no.
interface.
To
But
the scalp, to
Electrodes.
the scalp.
oh, so much. Oh, Jesus. I have, yeah,
Yeah,
please edit that out. Sleepy Mari. Oh, gosh. Yeah. Speaking of creating confusion. Yeah, but when you're talking about an implant, what is that implant doing? How is that, a part of the interface? Is the implant itself just taking out information, or is it a bridge mechanism, like all these type of things, right?
yeah,
That most of us just are clueless about, right?
yeah. And the intention with Elon Musk's is not just to have it recording, but also influencing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can potentiate activity and boost function in an area
Yeah.
by shifting the basal membrane potential and
Mhm.
turning the area on more.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that I um years ago, back in the early 70s, I used to go to the library periodically to see who may have checked out a book, and uh, physical control of the human brain, and uh, uh, the author was famous for standing in the middle of a bull ring with a little box with a button on it, and this overly aggressive bull is charging around, and he steps into the ring with his little box, and then the bull's starting to think to come towards him, and is scratching the ground and whatnot, and he hits the button. The bull just stops. Whoa. And then it starts to take a couple steps towards him. He hits the button again. Whoa, it just stops. And he went over, and he basically pets the bull, who had been totally enraged. But the bull wouldn't even think about anything aggressive towards him because he had gotten a direct shock into the brain. And the human, control over the human brain. Uh, at that time, the book Terminal Man came out, and I don't know if you remember that one, but temporal lobe epilepsy guy who was a criminal basically had an implant that was going to stop the discharges from happening. It would stimulate if it detected the pattern, it would stimulate and turn it off, and his brain kind of learned how to work around it. And anyway, he's the Terminal Man was, I think, a precursor to implant uh, difficulties later that we're seeing now. So.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of interesting. There was a show up here in Canada, just everybody's talking about AI. What is the definition of AI? Everything means AI, and everything about AI is
Feedback.
super positive. Yeah. But the comment was really great, and I wish I could credit, but he was kind of saying for every magnificent invention, there's somebody out there thinking, how can we make this a bomb? So I think that's something else that we ethically really, really have to be cautious about, in terms of what are the purpose of these implants. Love it to help people speak, love it to help people regain uh, uh, mobility. I mean, some of the things we haven't even talked about, in terms of some of these, I call them kind of locked in diseases or syndromes where, the person wants to communicate, but they can't get it out. Hello, autism,
Yeah.
like, wow, if we can go in there. But, as Jay was saying, if you can do this to a bull, you can also make it charge, and bless the military in many regards. But on the other side, whoa, you don't have to have more than 5 brain cells to figure out that there's some dangerous potential there. So,
And you hear people are only using a certain percentage of their brain. Whatever that, whatever that,
oh, Jay, you take that one. You take that one.
whatever the percentage is there something that can be, is it conceivable that there is something, this is where Dr. Marie gets on her soapbox and says that's unethical, but is there something that can be done to, and I'm not talking neurofeedback, but I'm talking about taking data from this source and putting it into that brain? Is that, you think that'll ever
So,
happen?
you know, um, the there is the capability of recording patterns off the spike train patterns off the temporal lobe area on and then playing it back in a non-functional or a dysfunctional temporal lobe. And that capability has been around ever since Dirk invented that 600 hertz chip that could actually record spike trains accurately. And you know, um, the intermittent pulse feedback or intermittent pulse train stimulation was invented by him. He's been on the leading edge of um, implant chip design. The chip maker people come to him and talk about what do we do now? So.
Well, I'll make it simpler. How about, when I didn't study for a test, but I recorded all the information on an audio cassette and I played it at night when I went to bed. Does that,
just
does
have
that,
AI write
Okay,
your test, Pete. I
you
mean, come
know,
on.
there is such a thing as Hypnopedia, the
Yeah.
sleep learning. However, the efficiency of it isn't so great. If you have material that you hear in your sleep, your learning curve learning it is faster than somebody who's learning it cold without the priming in your sleep. But that it doesn't mean that you wake up in the morning with it intact. You can just learn it quicker. That's all.
Don't
So
do this at home. If I could digress a silly little story. I mean, obviously I grew up in a house of psychology. But I forget how old I was, 16 or 17, and I hadn't studied for an exam. So I literally recorded myself, on those, those cassettes. With all the answers, stuck it on under my pillow and magically expected. No, all I did, I was just really, really sleepy the next day. But of course, I was listening to it, which is the classic, if don't, stay up and
yeah,
and overstudy. Don't pull an all-nighter. Just actually get your sleep. But yeah, I guess a cute little story. Whether we're talking about really older proved theory and then the technology of the cassette being used very, very wrong, interrupting my sleep cycle. I mean, it's the same type of issue moving
yeah,
forward.
Well, studying, I mean, certain people study a certain way. I
Yeah.
mean, I had to go into a classroom with a cassette recorder because I couldn't, when I talk to somebody or I listen, I look at them and I pay attention, and I can't interrupt myself by writing down notes because I lose the track. So I either uh pay attention on taking the notes, and then I listen to what the person says later, and I try to match up the two. What's going on with my brain and trying to learn like that, team?
Well, I can jump in terms of note taking has to be taught very, very early. And I think there's a failure in the school system where,
yeah,
we just kind of do what we do, and then all of a sudden in later middle school you expect people to be able to note take. For any teachers out there, you've got to teach the kids what I call keywords. So those are the words that you really, really need to know, and what I call trigger words. Those are the words that aren't as relevant but make you think about other words, and you've got to teach that really, really young. We're right on the plagiarism thing. So it's interesting how in primary school we have kids copy everything, lines from the book, and then all of a sudden the next year we go, hey, that's plagiarism.
yeah.
So yeah.
So reception and expression are difficult to happen at the same time.
Mhm.
In the 1970s, humanistic groups that they would set up, they would have people sitting face to face, and they would give them like a minute to come up with some really brief thing that you really want to tell the person that you're facing.
Mhm.
And so the two of you basically are looking eye to eye, and you come up with what you really want to say, and then you both have to say it at the same time. Total scramble there. If you're expressing, you're not receiving.
Yeah.
And if you're receiving, your expression ends up getting in the way. Now you can learn kind of background scrawling, to catch some notes. My college notes couldn't be read by anybody. It was all kind of a scramble shorthand, and I could look at it and know what it meant, but yeah, good luck borrowing it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean that was a classic. If you ever had to take notes for a friend, like forget it, just as Jay said.
yeah,
But also, I mean, for all those folks doing couples therapy out there, it's a big issue, when somebody's talking and you have an issue in the relationship where somebody isn't feeling heard, all those classic things. If somebody is learning the skill of supposedly listening, but they're just holding place for their own thought, again, you're going to fail in communication. So
yeah.
this
Well,
is
yeah, I'm like, why is she writing that down? What?
now we're getting into the humor,
What?
but
No, I'm dead serious. Why did Dr. Marie write that down? What? I lost my train of thought because I'm looking at you. You're like, oh man, something's wrong right there.
yeah, no, but and we're all different. I mean, Jay can really speak to that. Part of this is, how and when we're taught. Yeah,
I'll
there's
admit to being very different.
I'll second the motion.
I think all three of us would pass the abnormal test. Yeah, but I mean,
Well,
no,
what's normal?
Well, that's what I mean. But there is no normal.
That's
But I mean, we
not in the DSM.
Yeah, you can't bill for it.
Yeah. No, but it's interesting stuff to have on the radar, whether it's relationships or how we teach. One of the things that this is another little joke. I have so many folks come in, with quote unquote written output disorder and say, I can't write as fast as I think. Pardon my language. I'm like, no shit. Welcome to humanity. The expectations here and just teaching individuals to either slow down the thought to the pace of the hand or speed up the hand. Hence why most of us fast thinkers have absolutely illegible handwriting, like just completely illegible, because we don't want to or can't slow down our brains to the pace of the hand. So be it, if only you have to read it, as Jay says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So I have an excuse for my bad handwriting. I cut those four
Ah.
fingers off, but and had them put back on. But my handwriting was terrible before that. It's just a good excuse, you know.
Oh, I'm sticking to mine. I'm sticking to mine.
but
when I do notes for clients, yes, I still write by hand. I'll read it out to them so that they can decipher it.
doctors do dictation. Do psychologists, like, can you record a session?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as long as you have permission from your client. And
Yeah.
again, it's what's the purpose of it? I mean, I know some clients really like to record so they can review things. Others, I find it's really, really important to be in the moment. Don't record it because you're expecting to go back and go through the recording.
Well,
Yeah, we're just talking about methods. They work for some people, don't work for other people. My
let me
my
tell you.
only thing is don't, for a therapist, not to always stick with your pet method, do what the client needs.
Well, we started this talking about AI, and I'm just letting you know a version of the way I would use it is,
Oh, no.
a conversation that has been approved. You're trying to pay attention to something, or you're at a meeting and you record it. And instead of me going back listening to the recording, I upload the recording, get the transcript, and run it through AI to take 60 minutes and give it to me in 10 minutes. I think that is a
Yeah.
pretty genius way of doing things, because like I said, what did I miss? What's the important
Yeah.
things?
Well, it's
And
always
Hey AI,
crazy that,
cliff note this talk for me, would you?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But the thing is, like, who is programming the AI? That's always the point. How do you determine what is important? Okay. And this is also, I mean, we're just talking about remembering of supposedly data points, but if there's anything
Yeah.
sentient in there, or that should be um emotional and looks at or level of importance from a sentient being. I mean, boy, this is a huge conversation. Do you want to talk about this for 5 minutes, Pete, or 5 days?
well, no, but what's happened with the AI and ChatGPT, this 4.0 or whatever you want to call it. What's up,
Yeah.
Sky? You made the show last week. And you made it this week.
Sits
No,
right next to me here.
but like how I'm using it with this podcast is, instead of me repeating Jay Gunkelman, the man has read over 500,000 brain scans or a million brain scans, Dr. Marie Author, that can now go into memory, and I can put each show's transcript from memory. It'll hold that back in there, and it can reference other shows and important things to bring up way better than what I could do personally, because
That's cool. You're talking about a system there. You're selecting, and then you're using a
Yeah.
system used as a tool like that. Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Its use in medicine for looking at complex images to identify subtleties of a tumor on a neuroimaging of some sort. That's very, very valuable.
Yep.
They have difficult to discern EEG patterns for rookie neurologists, and they can now sort between known categories of EEG. So they're getting to the point where they can end up being an assist,
Yeah.
but not necessarily replacement for. You know, you they still make shit up.
That's the big thing.
So you train it.
The rookie, helping the rookie as a learning tool. But my
Yeah.
I'm going to go so far as to say fear, knowing that fear sometimes is completely irrational. But my fear, and a lot of what I'm seeing is the supposed AI replacing the acquisition of pattern recognition on the human.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think this is where I go back to artificial intelligence versus assisted intelligence. And I'm so pro this intelligence being an assistant. Okay. And I'd say as we up the game and we program more and more, the level of assistance, there's nothing wrong with the level of assistance going up. But the second we give it all to AI, not only will AI miss things, but we're going to start to get really stupid. Okay. And like, what is going to discover a new pattern? Or who is going to discover a new pattern? Is it 50-50? I mean,
Well, here, I'll give an example, like
mm,
a primary care physician, a GP, okay? You tell them what's going on with you, and they're looking it up themselves because they don't know. I
yep,
think it's not about eliminating, it's like that uh the initial contact, whoever it is, that has to go up to the next level
mhm,
because a lot of that stuff can be done once it's trained and learned. Look, we're in the
yep,
feedback business, right? Neurofeedback. Well, it's like, hey, you put this in, it's wrong, you correct it and move on to something else. So
yep.
the first point of contact is dealing with a higher level query. I think that's where we're going. It's not eliminating, it's upgrading. Why do you want to wait for a doctor for 20 minutes when you can get the initial out specialist, that's where it is. You got any thoughts on that, Dr. Marie?
Yeah, many. Again, I feel if this is used as a good tool, you bet. I mean, one of the things I'm very overt with, every single pharmaceutical out there has 5,000 different names. A client will give me a name, and I'll just give me a second. I want to check that this is actually the class of medication that I think it is. Sure. One of the things I also think is beautiful is the capacity of a professional to say, I don't know, and be transparent. Let's find out together. But I think the key thing is together. We joke about Dr. Google. I think Dr. Google is fabulous, can really educate. But now it's really gone through and more, and I really don't want to beat up on younger people too much, but adolescents and youth are coming in with these self-diagnoses, insisting that they have them and wanting them. And
Is
so
that a
that's,
bad thing?
yes. Yes,
It,
it's like coming in and saying, I have cancer and I want cancer, right? I mean, I'm giving a real extreme, a real extreme. I'm obviously being incredibly dramatic.
the
Um,
the
but
difficulty with Dr. Google is the input into the search. If it's a subjective symptom as opposed to an objective observation, and you can chase a subjective guess of a symptom down a rat hole of deep knowledge that's important, but it's about a symptom that you don't really have, and
yeah,
uh, uh, it,
so well put,
the
Jay. Yeah.
they're physicians get grumpy if you come in with Dr. Google information, but you also have to remember that the patient may have lived with their disorder for decades and know more about it than the doctor might.
Yeah.
And the doctor sometimes should be doing some doctor Googling as well.
Yeah.
And
Now we keep
and
saying Dr. Googling. I think Google's in trouble because why waste your time with Google? Because there's only a certain amount of sources that you trust. Okay, here's my issue, and I only want Dirk, I want Jay, I want Dr. Marie. That's it.
Yeah.
Try to get that out of Google. It's not happening. They're in trouble.
Yeah, well, they don't, in terms of the ability to recognize a source that can be trusted, okay, a source that is vetted to a certain extent, a source that you can learn from, right? That's the big issue. But I mean, flipping back a little bit before we digress into this wonderful topic, for a young parent with an infant looking up, the conversion of a fever in terms of when to get word or not, that's really, really good stuff. So, I mean, there are some level 1 things that I think is fabulous. But yeah, Pete, the way it's being used now.
Well, I think like if I could go back in time with my kid, I'd be logging this stuff in. Hey, I was worried. Here was the temperature, here was the symptom, and here was the outcome. And it would remind me, hey, you were worried about it before, get this checked out. It's not an issue, or it's more interactive. It's almost like I don't want to say a consultant, or it's almost like I got a second head on my shoulder. Maybe it's the angel on the one side and the devil on the left, but
you got it. You got it. And power to the angels, so to speak, right? The other thing that we haven't brought up is, all these medical things, it functions on the same algorithm, right? That they're trying to keep you in as long as possible so that you watch more adverts, okay? And how do you keep somebody in longer? It's like, nah, chances are this is just fantastic. Check with your doctor just to be safe, right? Instead of they take you down as, we used to call them rabbit holes. I like rat hole, the way Jay said, with more progressively negative and concerning information under the guise of liability that they have to share all the negatives as well, right? They're trying to keep you on the sites.
Earaches, pink eye, all that. Remember, okay, COVID, we would do the telehealth, but now I can pay a fee and all this little stuff. I don't even have to come. I know I'm talking to a human being, but how long is it going to be before I'm not talking to a human being?
Jay, I think you already aren't.
Yeah.
Seriously. Yeah. In many cases, you already aren't. Yeah.
Well, it's another country.
Yeah.
Try to call your wireless service.
Yeah.
That'd be a great thing for AI. No, this is, I do think everybody has to upgrade their game. Okay. It's great. You got a degree like a gazillion years ago. If you're not keeping up with it, okay, great. You're doing the minimum of hours or credits or whatever. But if you're not really keeping up on things can, really pass you by.
Well, on the other hand, though, I think that's a positive, in terms of how much we can know and how much we come by. And I think that's where Google and whatnot can be really, really positive. I mean, if I have a general curiosity about an ailment or a disease that I haven't heard about, it's a really, really good place to start to get a basic idea. And then I would say any responsible practitioner goes to the proper literature. Okay. But the general public doesn't do that. Now, the $1 million question is, should they be expected to? Right? And should they be expected to be able to differentiate between vetted and non-vetted sources? Right. This is one of my rants. It's even in the book in terms of access to knowledge. What I hate about university libraries going online is we're limiting access to knowledge. Not so many years ago, if you wanted to learn something, you took the bus or the subway or walked or took your car to a local university, and you could go into those journals and you knew they were good. Now you've got to pay a minimum of $30 for vetted knowledge. It's no surprise that everybody's going on Google, and it's a crapshoot in terms of what you get. I have a major issue with the isolating or the sequestering of the acquisition of knowledge. I don't want to say under the guise. I think the universities are completely naive to this. So you have experts lay people and this soup in the middle.
Yeah. And it takes an expert to go into the literature and not be fooled as well.
Yeah,
There's predatory journals out there.
that's
You
true.
know, I get emails and they say, we'd be happy to publish a paper, and by the way, you could be on our editorial board, and we can do a special edition on a topic of your choice, and and the it, if you're hooked in, suckered in with that ego stroke, you're suckered into a predatory
Look,
journal. There's an
okay.
entire list of them, Beal's list of predatory journals, and if you publish in one of those, you can, but it's like burying the knowledge under a bushel. It's not going to be seen by anybody. The impact factor is below 1. It's just not going to be seen. So,
Jay, do you mind repeating the name of that list? I think that would be really helpful for everybody.
Beal's list.
Beal?
Beal. Beal's list of
Great.
predatory journals.
Yeah, because there are those, and now I even think they're the predatory conferences.
Yeah.
And some decent names are even starting to go to them, which I find kind of creepy.
And, uh, you can publish a poor study in a journal that doesn't really give you you're on the review panel, so it goes in. If the author is also listed as a reviewer on the journal, and the impact factor, if you look up the impact factor of the journal is below 1, don't even bother reading the paper.
But it's changing though. The problem here is
junk.
those are completely open source, right? So those quote unquote predatory journals are the ones that everybody can access. So they're going up in false status simply by accessibility.
Yeah, and the names of the journals sound great, and I mean,
except when they're misspelled, that's a bit of a clue.
Yeah. So, but if you publish in a predatory journal and somebody's doing a meta-analysis of studies, a good journal won't let you quote a publication in a predatory journal. I mean, they know, and it's difficult enough for a reputable journal to end up having continuously high quality papers that end up being able to be replicated. There's a big problem in replication nowadays. Even in some of the good journals, they have papers that can't be replicated. So, it's we're dealing with some very, very difficult techniques to actually master and operate properly, and that's how you end up with the fMRI study with the dead salmon recognizing meaningful pictures. When they do the analysis, the salmon's brain showed that they were responding to these pictures. Now, they got these salmon at a store. You don't get live salmon at a store, you know. So it was inherent to their analytic technique, and they didn't realize it. And it's that kind of an error can be done in a paper. And until you get something replicated in an fMRI, you still want to kind of look for more information. That the first out of the gates finding is something that has to find a preferably an independent replication. And looking at the laboratory and the people that are doing the fMRI work, is it a lab that seems to know what they're doing? So.
Well, let's go brain computer interface to swapping brains.
Dead salmon research.
Dead salmon research. You get it all here on the Neurofeedback podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
All with humor and panache.
That's right. That's right. Jay Gunkelman, Dr. Marie Swingle, and Sky.
Yeah, well, Sky got up and he went into the rest of the house.
He's out running.
He's a loose cannon today. So
Oh man, he can run, man. He can run.
yeah, if you've seen the post online, I think he had like 5 dogs chasing him in a long line
See the post
behind
online,
him,
Jay. It was on I put it on the last show. Check it
and
out.
he slows down and looks behind himself to make sure that they're close enough to keep chasing him, and then he kicks it in a higher
Another
gear
gear.
and kind of zooms forward. But he logged in 15 miles that day. They have what's called a fit bark. It's like a Fitbit for people, but it's for dogs, and it's also a GPS locator. So, um,
And that
yeah,
was a light day for him, I'm sure.
well, it was just a good day out with, and there's different parks. That one where he has a lot of open road
Yeah.
to hike on and stuff, but very few dogs. But Point Isabella in Berkeley is just full of dogs. So um, I really appreciated that this pack of big dogs chasing Sky, who's a big dog. He's 100 pounds at this point. That they would part the pack and go around little dogs that were just standing there. And at the end of the video,
Stop for lunch.
there's a little pug that's just standing there going like, something just buzzed past. What was it? So anyway, yeah, he's a good pup, and all the work on socialization has, I think, really benefited. And he's not aggressive, and he plays well with other dogs. So.
And for the next topic will be doggy neurofeedback. Jay Gunkelman and Dr. Marie Swingle. Have a great weekend, all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. The Neuronoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.